It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from China. Donald Trump has declared war on Canada. Well, actually, Mark Carney has declared war on the United States, although as he doesn't have an army, I'm not sure how that one is going to work out. In any case, I have lost count of the number of wars. The peace president, Donald Trump, is now inveigled in, up to his neck in wars, and Witkoff and Kushner have cancelled their apparently imminent visit to Moscow. Must be because there's something in the air, and that something is taking a terrible toll on the Zelensky regime in Kiev. There's all kinds of trouble kicking off in the American political scene, and Kushner has just met the putative leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. Clear indication of an anticipation of a changing of the congressional leadership come November. Well, you'd be a fool not to anticipate that. It's coming up. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. It is completely bizarre. The Canadian public has been told for decades that China was their danger. China wanted to take them over. And before that, it was the Russians what done it. And you'll recall the extraordinary effort made by Canada to arrest and detain under house arrest and prosecute the daughter of the founder of Huawei. Well, it turns out it wasn't the Russians or the Chinese that were any danger to Canada at all. It was the United States of America, whose bidding successive Canadian prime ministers have done for decades. There was no demand that any American president would make of them. But eating Argentine meat might well have been the last straw. And mind you, if you break the camel's back, you could start eating camels. Why not? They are now butchering wild horses in the United States of America and selling them at $25 a piece for food. Well, the ranchers are revolting in the United States, not about the fate of the wild horses, but about the fate of the American farmer, which is going south in order to facilitate some class of bailout, a food bailout for Milei, the miracle worker of Argentina. Trump said on the airplane tonight, well, the Argentines are dying. We've got to do something to help them. But it's Trump's friend who's the president of Argentina. And remember his chainsaw? Maybe he was looking to butcher a wild horse or two. But I digress. Canada says it is now in a war with the United States of America. That's the Canada that we were told was an indispensable Five Eyes NATO ally of the United States of America. Well, now they're at war. Somebody call Article 5 or 7 or all these articles and chapters. I'm beginning to forget them. It's 25th Amendment I'm looking for in Washington. But we've now got two NATO countries at war with each other, according to the Prime Minister of one of them, the Prime Minister of Canada. Trump has just slapped the mother of all tariffs on Canada, his nearest neighbour. He continues to demand publicly that Canada bows to them and accepts its fate as the 51st state of the United States of America. Although they'll need to hurry up because Greenland might beat them to it. Oh, wait, Denmark, which owns Greenland, is also in NATO. So there's two NATO conflicts. No, three, because Trump has already declared war on Spain, wants nothing more to do with them. He earlier declared war on Italy. He withdrew his troops from Germany. This madman, in a paroxysm of pique, is threatening war or making war all over the world. How's it going to work out with Canada? I mean, the Rocky Mountains are quite good terrain for guerrilla fighting, and as I recall from my many coast-to-coast speaking tours of Canada, there's a lot of thickly wooded areas. Those thickly wooded areas would conceal a Mountie or two, would conceal a backwoodsman, no doubt, or two. He could arm himself with the muskets that they were buying in such profusion, in fear of a Russian or a Chinese invasion of their magnificent country, the second biggest country in the world. But I don't think they've got an army. I don't think they've got an air force. I don't think they've got a navy. And if they do, it's a Gilbert and Sullivan one. Which is kind of Trump's point. They want the protection of the United States nuclear umbrella without actually being a part of the United States. Mind you, who'd want to be a part of the United States? Have you seen it recently? Have you seen the streets around the University of California, Berkeley? I saw today, Berkeley, you'd think, I mean, it conjures up Elysian fields, but it's actually a camp of junkies, of homeless people, of desperate people, of poor people. And that's just Berkeley. Have you seen Philadelphia? Who'd want to be a part of the United States of America? The mass shootouts in malls, in cinemas, in clubs, in schools, in colleges, in universities are now practically a daily occurrence. So it's hardly surprising that Canada ain't that keen on becoming the 51st state. So we have the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. But that's not the only place where that's happening. And I don't just mean Greenland. I don't just mean Spain. I don't mean Italy or Germany or any of the other satrapies that haven't agreed to fall to their knees in front of Donald Trump, which by all accounts is a very dangerous place to be. I refer to Iran. Is there a war against Iran or not? Well, tomorrow a new kind of war is to be launched. It's called all-out war. It's all-out war of siege, to starve the Iranians to succumb, to surrender. And moreover, according to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, a new form of sanction warfare is to be unleashed tomorrow on Iran, a more comprehensive, a more savage regime of sanctions than has ever been seen anywhere in the world, in all history. Well, having seen as I did the up-close and personal effects of the United States sanctions siege on Iraq in the late 90s and in the early part of this century, I don't really look forward to seeing what that siege might produce. But here's the rub. Trump has threatened everybody else in the world who do not accept his medieval siege tactics. He's threatened them with economic oblivion. The one major problem with that is that the country trading most heavily with Iran is the People's Republic of China, which has rejected Trump's illegal sanctions. For illegal they are. Only the United Nations Security Council can impose extraterritorial sanctions on anybody, although the US has been doing it against Cuba for many decades past. It is flatly illegal. And China will not obey illegal sanctions regimes. So China has already declared that it does not recognize these new sanctions that Trump will impose upon Iran this very morrow. How's that going to work? Given the United States completely needs China. It's begging China for rare earth materials and other things. It can't survive. Its military can't survive without trade with China. And if they dream of unleashing a blizzard of economic sanctions against China, China will retaliate dollar for dollar, pound for pound, item for item. And then there's the fact that Trump is about to receive a state visit by the president of China, Xi Jinping. How's that going to go? What kind of atmosphere will be involved in that state visit? That is, if Xi Jinping even goes, he might say, well, if you're about to launch an economic war to oblivion against us, then it's probably not the best time for a state visit to the United States. But then the two of them are due to meet in China itself at the APEC conference in Shenzhen in just a few weeks' time. What's that going to be like if Trump has unleashed a hurricane against Iran aimed at China, so that China somehow suffers a loss of energy exports from Iran? What kind of madness is this? Of course, it goes without saying that the Iranians are not going to buckle because Donald Trump's going to sanction them. They've been sanctioned for 45 years. They've never been anything other than sanctioned. What are these miracle new sanctions that Scott Bessent has in mind that will be different from decades of sanctions? We'll ask our expert guests precisely that. But I want to turn to the most remarkable war announced by Donald Trump this week. He threatened to use the US military on the bond market. Now, it may be that his cognitive decline is such that he thought the reporter was asking him about the bomb market, although what the bomb market is, I don't know. And why your answer to a question about the bomb market would be yes, bomb them, but that's exactly what he said. He speaks far too much, Donald Trump. He really needs to throw away that phone, or that young woman that carries his diaper bag needs to take his phone away from him. But he said, when she asked him how he was going to resolve the crisis in the bond market, which sees yields all over the place, even when the United States buys back some of its own debt, he said, we've got the most powerful military in the world and we'll not be afraid to use it. What are you going to do? Kill the people that won't buy your bonds? Bomb the people who don't want your debt? Japan is about to unload a fortune in American Treasury bills tomorrow, as reportedly is China. It's going to be a terrible day on the markets for the United States of America tomorrow. Donald Trump, of course, already have done his stockbroker call, as will Barron, as will the rest of the family. They'll be trading like Billy O. Having influenced the market, they'll seek to profit from it in a Rabelaisian flurry of corruption such as has never been seen on planet Earth before. Time is running, so I need to turn to the Ukraine. Witkoff and Kushner were expected, perhaps tomorrow, certainly the day after, certainly this coming week, in Moscow. But they're now not coming. The optimist would say that's because something's up. The pessimist would say that the only thing up is the likelihood of Zelensky's political or worse demise as the crisis in the Ukraine deepens. The Corruption Bureau, NABU, it's a great name. They're definitely nabbing Zelensky's closest aides right now on corruption that would make your eyes water. And it's all on tape. And NABU, which actually works for the United States rather than the Ukrainian state, has got the goods, got the receipts, got the stolen money and gold and the ingots of all kinds of precious metals. And the people they're nabbing are the top people in Zelensky's circle. There's also the growing demands from the man that used to be the defense minister in Ukraine, as well as many others, for an election in Ukraine. After all, if Russia can have an election in the middle of a war against 27 NATO countries, why can't Zelensky? The answer is obvious. Zelensky would lose. Putin is going to win. There's so much else that I need to talk about, but I wanted to spend just a moment on Kushner's meeting today with Hakeem Jeffries, the putative leader of a Democratic Party-controlled Congress. The fact that they met at all is a clear indication that all claims to the contrary, Trump knows his goose is cooked. Goose. Why don't they try goose? Let them eat goose. rather than wild horses. His goose is cooked in November, which is coming up fast. And so why Kushner met Jeffries was, first of all, to make it clear that it's a big club and you're not in it. There's no reason for any nastiness or unpleasantness just because one cheek takes over from the other cheek. They are, after all, part of the same ass. But the second big takeaway from this is that this guy Jeffries is a joker. And yet he's supported by the mayor of New York. He's supported by AOC. If he's going to be Kushner's man in a Democratic-controlled Congress, what's the point of changing the Congress at all? And so I hope if the Democrats have any idea that they're going to win the presidency in 2 years' time, they have to sharpen up their political profile, not blunt it by some kind of sweetheart deal that the Democrats will take control but won't really do anything with it. Garland Nixon will know what's happening. He's up next. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows. Fabulous. Two great calls in a row there. One from California, one from Orlando. I think that Japan is walking on extremely thin ice in the provocations that they are currently allowing the US to manipulate them into making. I've spent a lot of time in China. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. There is visceral feelings about Japan in China. Of all of the countries of the world, China will never, ever, ever, ever forgive what Japan did to the Chinese people. They murdered more than 20 million Chinese. The war, which for us started in 1939 and for you started considerably more than that, further on than that. Japan invaded China in 1931 and didn't leave until their defeat in 1945. They further invaded other parts of China in 1936 and they killed 20 million Chinese people.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Here's the poll this evening. Will Trump's D-Day sanctions starve Iran into submission? Big poll. So far, well over 20,000 people have voted already, and I'm only just announcing it. You can vote yes or no, simple, binary, on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm almost at 1 million subscribers. I need to get to 1 million for algorithmic reasons. Please, you've got no reason not to. Costs nothing, will not influence your own algorithm in any way. Please subscribe if you are watching on the YouTube stream, and if you are in the avant-garde, the creme de la creme, who support the show through patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote there. It is, well, quite heavily weighted, the score so far. I'll not divulge exactly how. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 855-50-MOATS, MOATS, or 855-50-66287. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0800-229-4411, and the worldwide number is 0044-203-966-26 825. Garland Nixon is no ordinary radio talk show host, no ordinary political analyst. He's the coolest cat in the West and the best informed in America. Garland, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. I'm tempted to say, who's getting it first, Canada or Greenland?
You know, we're in a situation now where Donald Trump generally, you know, declares some kind of war, economic war, kinetic war on a country or two almost weekly. So while, you know, right now we're talking about, you know, this huge economic war and tariffs against Canada, you know, I kind of have the feeling that by the end of the week, it'll be something else. You know, who knows what country he'll be declaring tariffs on. So he makes these grand proclamations. He gets involved in these dust-ups with other leaders. I think he really enjoys that kind of stuff. And it gives him the ability to distract us from the catastrophe that he's facing both in the Middle East and in Ukraine. So I think that, you know, we'll talk about this for a while, but I tend to feel that it will get settled fairly quickly because a lot of major companies stand to lose money from this. So I think, personally, I think it'll be settled within a week or so.
But it's an exquisite irony that the Canadians, having spent decades doing the US's bidding on every international conflict, every war, and who have been telling their own people that the biggest danger to them was China, and the second biggest danger to them was Russia. Turns out it's Donald Trump that's their biggest danger, according to him at least.
Well, and what we're seeing now is that a desperate and kind of crumbling empire is furious at everyone. And this is simply, it seems to me that an angry Donald Trump always punches whoever is the closest person to him. Look what's happening right now with South Korea. President Trump is having the same kind of a war, a battle with South Korea. He's furious at the South Koreans because they won't join him in this, you know, feudal attempt to overthrow the government of Iran. So we see country after country, former ally after ally, starting to fall by the wayside, falling from President Trump's good graces. And I think it's just indicative of a very, very unstable empire led by an unstable president.
Yeah, I mean, his cabinet colleagues seem content when you see them lined up behind him. They're clapping like seals and nodding like dogs. No sign of that famous 25th Amendment yet. Let's turn to the proximate reason for concern. Tomorrow, he's going to unleash a new kind of war on Iran. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so once again, we're getting the, you know, kind of similar to what President Obama said back in 2012. We're going to unleash these massive sanctions on Iran, and it's going to wipe Iran out. I think it also kind of demonstrates that the actual kinetic war is lost, because if you've defeated Iran, you know, on the battlefield, as Trump says, and if all of their military capabilities have been destroyed, you would have no reason to do this. So it demonstrates that the actual physical part of the war has been lost. I think what's interesting about this is Iran's reaction, which demonstrates that Iran has some very, very powerful cards to play, because what the Iranians have said is this: that any country who abides by Donald Trump, the U.S.'s new sanctions regime, will be barred from the Straits of Hormuz permanently. So now countries, again, have to, you know, they have to start thinking that, yes, the United States will hurt us now, but we have to think about the long term. Additionally, I think that since China, you know, probably does more energy business with Iran than anyone else, and of course Russia, who's under, you know, like 20,000 sanctions, they do a lot of business, particularly foodstuffs and various things like that. If those two countries do not comply with the sanctions, which neither of them will, the sanctions become irrelevant. And as you probably know, one of the things that sanctions do is they just create black markets. They create the ability for certain people to get around the sanctions and to do a little bit of a markup. So all Donald Trump's doing is creating some new black markets, and he's putting another black mark on his presidency in that, again, within weeks, this will fall apart and he'll come up with something. And of course, Scott Bessent will tell us that he doesn't understand why it doesn't work, but the next one's going to work. That's for darn sure. It's a clown show we're watching, and it's quite frankly embarrassing as an American to watch these people.
Yes, I mean, it's good you mentioned China, because the sanctions don't work without China, and China has already rejected them. In fact, China's position is completely principled. It does not obey illegal sanctions, and these are illegal sanctions. The United States can sanction anybody it likes, but it can't force anybody else to sanction anybody. And that's what Trump is demanding that other countries in the world do. He's threatened oblivion to anybody trading with Iran, which in this case preeminently means China, the same China whose president is about to visit the United States. What, is he going to pull the chair away from the Chinese president rather than put it in for him, like he did with Netanyahu?
Well, I think he'll visit with generally the way it works, President Trump will visit with him, and immediately afterwards he'll announce some grand deal that the Chinese will have no idea what he's talking about. You know, they'll have a press conference, or he'll have a press conference and say, we had a great deal, a deal like no one could ever imagine. No one's ever seen a deal with this. And we'll ask the Chinese and they'll say, we don't know what he's talking about. We didn't make any deal with him. So that's what I expect from President Trump. And I tell you, these economic sanctions on Iran are analogous to the military attack on Iran, in that the United States can't accept that we don't have the military capability to dominate Iran and dominate the world. And we still, Pete Hegseth and Trump say we've got the most powerful military, we've destroyed Iran. So they're still pretending that we have the military capability to defeat Iran, even if we don't. They're also pretending that we have the economic power to rule the world and to dominate people. It is a refusal to accept the limits of American power and the death of American hegemony, such as it ever was.
And the deaths and blood of 774 United States service personnel. These numbers are rather different from the kind of boastful triumphalism of Hegseth. 774 American service personnel have lost their lives or shed their blood as wounded in a war which none of the networks told us the Americans were bleeding in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just a terrible tragedy. And I still feel as though that the numbers of dead and wounded are still significantly higher than we're being told, even higher than that 774. And as we know, usually a couple years later, we get the truth. And this is not just the Trump administration that does this, playing with the numbers. The Iranians, we always say that the adversary has lost far more people than they've lost, and we've lost far less. So, but this game, the game is over. The world knows that we've lost. We do have numerous politicians now that are starting to discuss the reality here in America. And they're saying, well, we lost the war. It's obvious that we lost. But I don't see the Trump administration ever being able to say we lost the war. All they can do is declare victory. Now they're moving in another direction, which is economic, and that's not going to have any other any better success. And I think we're looking at now an economic catastrophe for the United States, a political catastrophe. Although I don't know the Democrats, if anybody can screw this thing up in the midterms, it's the Democrats. So who knows what the heck's going to happen by the midterms? I'm guessing that maybe some of the independent candidates. You know, Sam Husseini, who I believe you've had on before, is running. So I'm guessing and hoping that some of the independent candidates will have the opportunity to get elected, because by the time we get to November, we're going to be in a catastrophic position here in the United States.
Well, we'll come back to the U.S. domestic scene in just a minute, but if it's obvious the Americans have lost the war, it's equally obvious the Iranians have won it. The news breaking that this pact, they're calling it the Mecca Pact now, between Turkey, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, turns out they've asked Iran to join it. That's quite a considerable diplomatic victory for Iran, but also a very big shift. These are three Sunni powers. Saudi Arabia was, until what seems like a month or two ago, practically at war itself with Iran. Now, Iran appears to have been invited to join the club. That would be a big, big shift, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think symbolically it's a big shift. I think it's symbolic that they're all angry at the United States, and of course that they all feel threatened by Israel. The Israelis are now attacking Turkish interests in Syria. I don't feel, although some people may believe that it is a material group that's coming together. I don't, because I mean the Pakistanis said, if anybody attacks Saudi Arabia, we're in. Well, at the time they signed that, the Houthis were attacking Saudi Arabia, and they still haven't. And the Pakistanis, I don't think, are going to get in. So I think, while I'm not saying that to say this is not a significant group of countries coming together, it's great symbolism. I don't think they're preparing for war as a defensive team against anyone else but Israel. Israel is the one that's threatening all of them, and I think they understand that one by one, they're being marked for attack by the Israelis, and I think they probably feel if we come together like this, the odds of Israel attacking them are significantly lower. But the Israelis plan on using the United States kind of like their version of Ukraine as cannon fodder anyway. We are to the Israelis what Ukraine is to NATO.
Now, coming back home, I can't resist this. I'm a lover of wild horses myself, and you're now capturing them in the wild and selling them at $25 a piece and sending them to the butcher because the price of butcher meat in your country has reached crisis stage. And then Trump tells us you're about to buy hundreds of tons of beef to try and bring the price down, but he declines to tell us at first from where you're buying that beef. Now turns out it's from the Argentine. That might well be the batch that China rejected because it was toxic. When it arrived in China from Argentina, they sent it back. They don't want it. It's filled with all kinds of horrors. Well, you're going to get it now. So you're going to be dining on wild horse meat and rancid Argentine meat. This is another Trump wheeze that has backfired within hours of being announced.
Well, I was recently looking at some documents about our beef industry, and I mean, like 77 cattle herders a day are going out of business. One of the things that we're dealing with now is a significant rise in diesel fuel, and of course, all of our produce industry, all of our animal production and et cetera, suffers greatly. There are a number of things happening. Let's not forget the tariffs. The tariffs on all of these other countries means that we can't sell a lot of things to other countries. Or the bottom line is this: anything that Canada buys from us that's being tariffed, there's likely another country that's going to sell it to them cheaper than the tariff. So these tariffs are having significant impacts on our ability to be viable in the international market. And I think issues such as beef and, God forbid, horse meat are just examples of the repercussions of the Trump administration's international economic policies. And just listen to Scott Bessent. Just look at this guy. The other day we had he was asked by a reporter about the price of oil going up, and his answer was, I really don't know why it's going up. Now, we all know he was lying, but the fact is that he's not even smart enough to make something up is what's really horrifying. So I think what we're looking at on so many levels are just the ramifications of incompetent people who don't understand how international markets work and who are extremely narcissistic, and they don't understand the limits of power. And they're caught back in the 1950s thinking that they can just issue orders all around. And these things, one by one, are coming back to haunt us. And now we're going to have poisoned beef and horse meat, I guess, in our supermarkets. And I don't know if people are going to buy it. I'm not. I'll just say that.
I'm glad to hear that. As a horse lover myself, it's simply horrifying thought. But you do have some talent. You've got that Hakeem Jeffries, who will be the leader of the Democrats, it would appear, in the Congress after November, and certainly that will be significant if the Democrats win the House, which seems almost certain that they will. The Senate might be something else. He was meeting Jared Kushner today. Kushner, who's supposed to be headed for Moscow to bring about the long-awaited end of the NATO war against Russia, is instead meeting secretly the Democratic leader to agree some kind of gentleman's agreement of how they're going to synthetically oppose each other whilst actually secretly agree with each other. That's what's happened today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the New York Times front page says President Trump's son-in-law and the man in line to be Speaker of a Democratic-led House discussed. What were they discussing? How Democrats and the administration could work together. And one of the things now in the Black community, the comical name for Hakeem Jeffries is Apac Shakur. That's what he's referred to often. But he's a man who's famously said, Israel today, Israel tomorrow, Israel forever. And I think one of the interesting things that's being discussed in light of this, and I think this is important, and you brought it up earlier, that New York, the New York mayor Mamdani not only endorsed him, but actually one of his fellow Democratic socialists, I forgot his name. It was an interesting name, Chia or something like that. But at any rate, nice guy. I've met him before. He was going to run against, he was going to challenge Hakeem Jeffries, and Mamdani made him stand down and protected Jeffries. Additionally, another woman whose name is Angie Nixon, interestingly enough, in Florida, she's a Democratic socialist. And she won the Senate primary. She'll be running in the Senate as the Democrats. But as soon as she won, one of the first things she said was, "My hearts go out to the people of Ukraine." And so what people are starting to say, at first a lot of people were excited, oh, Democratic Socialists, maybe they'll, change something. And what people are starting to realize is this: the Democratic Socialists, they rhetorically oppose the Israeli genocide and Israel's actions rhetorically, but when it comes to their concrete actions, they're to oppose it, it's kind of questionable. I mean, you're going to put one of the most vociferous supporters of Israel in Congress. You're going to support this guy to be in charge, and it appears to me that's the only conflict that they don't support. We've had Mamdani saying that Maduro and Diaz-Canel in Cuba are dictators. We've had them Bernie Sanders, DSA, talking about the protesters in Iran. We must stand with them. So if you look at these DSA people, what you see is the easy thing. Okay, they oppose genocide. Well, that's not a heavy lift. You're not really sticking your neck out far, in my opinion, to oppose genocide. That should be a minimum requirement. But when it comes to the rest of these imperial wars, they seem to be on board with them. And so I think the happiness and the glee of the potential change and reform from DSA candidates is, the shine's starting to wear off that a little bit. When you start, lifting up the hood and kind of looking under the hood a little bit, you start seeing some things that you really don't like.
Any reason to believe that Witkoff and Kushner have anything at all up their sleeve on the NATO-Ukraine war on Russia? Or is there a more banal reason, like they've got a democratic leader to meet, that they're not in Moscow right now?
Well, I think it's pretty clear right now that there are some back channel discussions. The Russians recently, in Russian media, and in fact, in one of President Putin's speeches, he said that the Ukrainians are facing a catastrophic situation, and that the Ukrainians have been reaching out to the Russians using intermediaries that are friendly to the Russians. However, the Russians said that the proposals they made were exotic and unrealistic. So I think the message is probably clear. Look, we're not getting anywhere. There is no point. I mean, Kanye West was in Russia. I guess maybe he was over there. He'd probably have a better chance of getting a deal. Him and Candace Owens would have a better chance of getting a deal in Russia than Witkoff and Kushner.
Absolutely. Garland Nixon, as always, a tour de force, a tour of the horizon. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let's take a quick break, then it's your calls all the way to the hour. Stay tuned. Let's go to California, who wouldn't, where Josh is on the line on Trump's strategy. Go ahead, Josh.
Trump has announced his intention to end forever wars. And when he says this, he means both the war on terror and the long-standing post-war bloc conflict that has given rise to all of these kind of pustular conflicts along the border of Russia and China, inclusive of the quote-unquote war on terror, the result of the resistance to the occupation. The transition from non-state actors to state actors, where it regards the resistance to the occupation of the Holy Land, and we can establish a denuclearization regime that has to come from the bottom up before it can come from the top down. There's absolutely no way to effect peace. And although the 67 borders is the prize, everyone has to learn how to play the game. And unfortunately, because we live in a world where everybody in every country is incidental as it relates to the conflict between the superpowers, the game is Trump's game, and the game is Putin's game, the game is Xi Jinping's game. So until people begin to play the game as it is, they're going to perpetuate a phase of the resistance to imperialism that is drawing to a close.
Well, I may be a visiting professor, Josh, but I'm not smart enough to understand the logic that you were arguing there. Much of it sounded like bollocks, I must tell you.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So, getting on for 25,000 of you have now voted. Will Trump's D-Day sanctions starve Iran into submission? It's a perfect binary, yes or no. You tell me. Yes or no? Will Trump's D-Day sanctions, which is tomorrow, will they starve Iran into submission? Get voting, please. Let's take the first call of the evening. It's the very well-spoken Gordon in Lewis on UK and Russian drones. Gordon, did you watch my discussion with Larry Johnson on the subject of drones? It seems to have gone quite well. These drones that Russia has now, Gerans, I think they're called, Gerans or Gerans, pretty devastating.
George, yes, and I'm a bit troubled. I was down the lodge today, and we're a wee bit worried because, like you said, the United Kingdom is now culpable of being involved in war against the lad Putin and his regime, and they have been financing, figuring, and sending people to drive these machines to go and kill innocents, and that's not a good thing because not only do they have the drones that you're talking about, George. You're from Scotland, yeah. One ICBM into the Holy Loch, Faslane, and a couple of other surreptitious places in Grangemouth refinery. Well, that's closed down thanks to Ed Miliband and Net Zero, but you know that. So, but that's all it would take. And England is totally and completely and absolutely without remit, foundation,
destroyed,
or anywhere with all.
Three missiles. Three missiles with 5 warheads on each. End of.
And do you know who rents into the United Kingdom? Halliburton. Do you remember Donald Rumsfeld shot his mate in the face with a gun? That's who rents the 4-5 nuclear missiles that Britain rents. They don't actually own them. Never mind the submarines, but the drone things, George, that troubles me because we do not want to get involved in a confrontation with one of the biggest democracies on earth, and it is a democracy. You can call it a communist plot. You can take Karl Marx and Highgate and throw them to the wind. This is people caring about people, and that's what matters, and that's what they fear is unity. Never mind Islam. Sorry,
well,
George.
Look, I'll tell you what, I've said this before, Gordon. Anybody that thinks Russia is a communist country has obviously not been there in the last 30 years. There are communists in Russia. They are currently the main opposition party. Whether they still will be next month after these elections to the Duma, I've got my doubts. But the idea that the Russians are seeking to recreate the Soviet Union, I wish they were. I wish they would, but they aren't and they won't. The Russians are being attacked by us, not the other way around. The Russians have not done anything to us. It's the other way around. And for the first time, a British Prime Minister has admitted that we supplied the drones that killed significant number of civilians in Russia just last week. These were workers in a warehouse, the equivalent of Amazon, Russia's equivalent of Amazon, called Wildberries. And now ozone has also been the subject of an attack. Now, you know, you're long enough in the tooth, Gordon. If I give a weapon to somebody, knowing that they're going to fire it and kill people with it, I am jointly and severally, as it says in Scottish law, responsible for that murder. And so Britain has now admitted that it is jointly and severally responsible for a significant number of civilian murders inside Russian territory. Now, I pray that Russia will not act as it is now absolutely legally entitled to act and take retaliatory measures against Britain, because I don't want Britain and its citizens to be harmed. But if Russia did, it would be Russia that was behaving legally while the United Kingdom was behaving illegally. So We're actually now counting on the good graces of President Putin in not doing what he is legally entitled to do in punishing Britain for that crime. And now, I mentioned the program I did with the expert ex-CIA. Can you ever be ex-CIA? Ex-Pentagon. Are you ever ex-Pentagon? The Larry Johnson interview about drones and how drone warfare had changed the world was very successful, much more successful than I expected it to be. I thought it was only nerds like me that wanted to learn more about these new weapons, drones, hypersonic missiles and so on. But it turns out there's a lot of nerds around. So much so that so many questions were raised. I was going to do the second episode on hypersonic missiles, but I'm going to do a second episode with Larry on the subject of drones just as soon as I'm able to do that. It won't be this week, but maybe next. Thanks, Gordon. Now look, huge news. The Moats GoFundMe page for the legend that is Erebos in New York has crossed a milestone. A big thanks for donating to help out our Moats legend. We closed Wednesday's show at just over £2,000. The total now stands at £3,029, which I don't know what that is in dollars, but it's getting on for $4,000. So the new target is 3.5. Let's keep on donating to help Erebos get back on his feet and get the wherewithal to be a regular contributor as a legend on the show. Richard in Durham wants to talk about just that. Go ahead, Rich.
Hi, George. Health and strength, my friend and brother. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Thank you. All good.
Yeah, it stole my thunder as well, but never mind. I've not made my usual contribution to the Moats today because I had contributed to the Erebos effort, and I just wanted
Thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing that, Richard. Yeah. Well, if we get him back on his feet, it's in the interests of the show. So don't feel bashful about that. It's very generous of you to do that.
He's absolutely salt of the earth to me. It's just so great. And it's so close to reaching the goal, and I just wanted to encourage everybody to please, if you know, it's not going to take much of a contribution, just a few people to do it, and they'll get the finishing line.
If we all gave a quid, he'd be back on his feet. He'd have a studio. He's a gem. He's a philosopher king. He has a voice that is the voice of the gods. It's astonishing clarity with which he speaks, and he's living on the street, literally. He got a back injury because he was sleeping on chairs that he found somewhere. He can't get internet. He's stateless, homeless, and yet he's a treasure. He's a global treasure of ours, and we discovered him. And now he's actually quite a well-known figure in political circles in the US. But it doesn't help him with those material problems that are holding him back. Last word to you, Rich.
Equally, for anybody who might not have had the chance or hasn't been able to contribute to the Moats via the Moats TV, please, if you believe in what the channel stands for, you don't have to give everything. Just what you can, and you won't believe the sensation of joy that comes over you once you've done it, it's just like, oh, I'm actually making a difference now, and it feels so great. So please do what you can, everybody, and also everybody help and
You're
strength.
a gentleman. You're a gentleman, Richard. I mean, 25,000 people have voted on this poll. If everybody that voted on this poll left £1, $1, €1, our problems would be over. We'd be cooking on gas, which is something many people are not going to be able to afford to do this winter, even if the gas is available at all. Thank you, Richard. In Durham, now a proper word of recognition for the top supporters of tonight's show. Firaz Zrik, Mark Bartrip, Paul and Bev Schofield, El Findlay, and Karim Jan. Big thanks to each and every one of you, and let's hope everyone joins us, even at the minimum of £1, €1, and $1. You just go to moats.tv. You'll see donate now button. Leave what you can. Why don't you? Now, coming up, it's Pulitzer Prize winner, former head of the New York Times Middle East Bureau, all-round gentleman and scholar, Chris Hedges, coming up just after this short break. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Trump's D-Day sanctions starve Iran into submission? It's a good question. Why don't we ask it of the sage himself, Chris Hedges, journalist, writer, and host of the Chris Hedges Report. Chris, D-Day tomorrow, not quite as glorious a D-Day as the one in 1944, although we had to wait rather a long time for it. It's a D-Day of starving Iran's people. Will it work?
No. That's not to deny the economic pain that the United States and Israel has inflicted on Iran, but Iran has been coping with sanctions for decades. The Iranian people understand that this is an existential fight for their own survival. Remember, Donald Trump has threatened apocalyptic violence, bombing them back to the Stone Ages. No matter what people think of the regime in Tehran, I don't think there's any question that Iranians feel under assault. They understand that both Netanyahu and Trump, they've flirted with rhetorically with this, with dropping nuclear devices. They've talked about destroying the infrastructure, the power plants, the water desalination plants, although Iran is not as vulnerable as countries like Kuwait. I think Kuwait, 90% of their water is desalinated. So will it inflict pain? Yes. But I still think that in the long run, Trump has lost. And he's kind of flailing about like a wounded animal. There was never any real strategy when this thing began last February 28th anyway. So, I mean, that's a long answer that can really come down to no.
What did you make of the, for me, quite extraordinary open letter to The Guardian? I must say, an open letter to The Guardian sounds like the ultimate liberal masturbation to me. A letter to The Guardian by luminaries, at least past luminaries in many cases, of the left, which seemed to, well, didn't seem to, it did equate the government of Iran with the Trump and Netanyahu administrations killing Iranians in large numbers and now planning to kill still more. Most people that I've seen, certainly most people that I politically travel with, saw this as a monstrous intervention at a time when Iran and its people are fighting for their very lives. What did you think?
Yeah, without question. But George, that's kind of the mantra among the Democratic Party and let's quote unquote the liberal class. It's not that they oppose Iran's the attacks on Iran, the war on Iran. It's that they oppose the fact that they weren't consulted. So this gets into the whole distortion of the Democratic Party and the liberal class in the United States, which is the war party. I mean, the Democratic Party in Europe would be considered a far-right party. And that's part of that whole mantra. And it's also the demonization of Iran. And I, as you know, I worked in Iran, spent significant time there. The complete misunderstanding of Iranian culture and Iranian politics. And the left, or let's call it the liberal class, is as guilty of this as the Trump administration.
Now, of course, if this D-Day turns out to be all that they're claiming it's going to be, the first barrier they're going to meet is that China has already said it does not recognize these sanctions and will not implement them. And judging by what Trump has promised, that will set the United States in an all-out trade war with China just before Xi Jinping arrives in the United States. How's that going to work out?
You remember when Trump earlier on tried to impose all those tariffs on China and back down? China has a kind of clout that that can make even a figure like Trump see reality. I mean, we're all watching the folly of this trade war with Canada. But Trump, on both the war in Iran and on the tariffs, he makes decisions or imposes policies and then backtracks very quickly. Again, there's no strategic thinking within the administration. He's impulsive, he's impetuous, he's ignorant. But I have a hard time believing that they're going to open a huge trade war with China, because China has the ability to inflict tremendous pain on the United States.
I remember when, in fact, I used to broadcast almost nightly at the time, that the Canadians seized the chief operating officer and daughter of the founder of Huawei at America's behest. The Canadians were told that China and Russia were their enemies, that the Palestinians, the Iranians were their enemies. And yet now Mark Carney says today, Canada is in a state of war with America. It's a bit comic opera, but what do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, Canadian policy traditionally has always been obsequious to to the United States. That's just been, part of the kind of modus operandi by which Canada has operated for many, many years. But they are dealing with an administration, and in particular Trump, a figure who enjoys slapping around its allies. And the more dependent a country is on the United States, and remember, Canada and Mexico are our largest trading partners, by the way, not China. The more dependent an ally is, the more abusive Trump can become. And I think that has been played out with our European allies, but is also being played out with Canada.
But Carney seems to be ready to stand up, or is that just for show?
No, I think it's so unreasonable. It's only 5% of goods that are coming in from Canada, but a lot of it is focused, especially on timber. That's a big one. The way Canada, remember, Trump has been talking about turning Canada into the 51st state. The way the Canadians have been treated, and we saw, of course, Carney at Davos. He gave that talk about the collapse of the old world order and the old alliances don't work anymore. He's correct. But I think Trump pushed Canada too far. I don't think that Carney really had much of a choice.
But he doesn't have an army, so he's obviously not going to have a real war with Trump. To coin a phrase, or to paraphrase, Canada doesn't have many cards in this, does it?
Well, so it has cards in that, for instance, a lot of the automakers have plants in Canada. There is a lot of trade, including, of course, from the tar sands. We get oil piped in from Canada all the way down to Houston. So there are cards they can play. But yes, you're right. Ultimately, if Trump, because of the kind of behemoth that the United States is, decides to go full out on Canada, it's going to be extremely difficult. One of the things you've seen Carney scramble to do is essentially build trade relationships with countries outside of North America, in particular with China.
Yeah, and that might be the secret of this conflict, mightn't it? Because although the US didn't explicitly demand that Canada drop its strategic partnership, it's called now, with China, it wanted a kind of veto on any other trade relationships that the Canadians had, which was implicitly a threat to Canada's relationship with China now.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see how this all plays out. There's some pain that the Canadians can inflict on the United States. There's a lot of pain that the United States can inflict on Canada. But again, Trump is so mercurial that this could all change next week. And I think that has been the pattern with Iran, and it's been the pattern with the tariffs. It's been a roller coaster on tariffs.
Yes, who remembers now the belligerence of Trump towards Spain? Well, the Spanish people remember it.
Yeah.
Ditto the Italian premier, who's otherwise a fangirl of Donald Trump, but who was gratuitously, egregiously abused by Trump on social media. Who remembers the threats to Denmark that they'd steal Greenland from them? Who remembers the rude words he said about Macron, little Macron, and so on? It does seem to be in his character to slap around his allies, as you put it. Is there a method in this madness? Is this going anywhere?
Well, is it going anywhere? Well, it's alienating just about everybody who's left from the United States. even these European leaders, now, they have to say this in private, but we know because of press leaks, they have concluded that, correctly, of course, that Trump is just completely unreliable. They're tethered to the United States, not least of all because of security arrangements. But they're moving. I mean, look, we're seeing within Germany the remilitarization of Germany, which history has shown is not a particularly great prospect. But there's a decoupling, and Trump is accelerating it. No, I think Trump is just a bully. He's like a mob boss, and the more vulnerable or the more dependent you are upon him, the worse you're going to be treated. The people he treats well are the people who can do him damage, like the Chinese. If you watch, he's pretty careful around the Chinese and the Russians too.
The Democrats are not put off, though. Hakeem Jeffries was in secret talks with Jared Kushner today, according to the New York Times, your former parish, to discuss ways that a Democratic-controlled House could continue to work business as usual with the Trump White House. I mean, that's an admission that the Democrats are nailed on to win the House, but it's also an admission that there ain't really much of a difference between them, isn't it?
No, I mean, and you see it in the pathetic campaign that mainstream Democrats are running. We have had insurgencies, Mamdani being the most prominent within the Democratic Party, but of course the Democratic hierarchy is deeply hostile, Chuck Schumer and these figures. So what did they offer in the last presidential campaign? Well, once they got rid of their candidate, who nobody was allowed to run against in the primaries, Joe Biden, who clearly was in cognitive decline, they anointed, and that is the word, nobody voted for Kamala Harris, who ran this issueless, vapid, celebrity-driven campaign on the ascendant, which cost over $1 billion, by the way, on the assumption that she wasn't Trump. And that's very dangerous. The poll numbers for Trump are poor, very poor. However, the Democratic Party is loathed. We know from opinion polls. I think Schumer's approval rating is 17%. I think it's definitely lower than Trump's. So, yeah, you're right. The Democratic Party has absolutely nothing to offer other than the fact that they're not Trump, which is not a very effective campaign strategy, as it didn't work for them very well in the last election. So, yeah, I think that this report is just an indication that even if they take control of the House. And I do think that is a question, whether they will, because the Trump administration has been working quite assiduously to fix the elections. There's all sorts of mechanisms they have used, appointing election deniers in states to oversee balloting, demanding registration rolls from states, curtailing mail-in ballots, holding out this threat that people will have to show a government-issued ID, their license or a passport. And about 50% of Americans, by the way, do not hold a passport. Many people, especially poor people in urban areas, don't have cars. They don't necessarily have a license. So it's a demographic the Republican Party wants to, in essence, annul from the elections, and talking about putting armed observers at election polling sites. All of this is not fantasy. I think the Trump administration is preparing. We know what their intent is. That's without question. Whether they succeed, that's an unknown at this point. But I do think, and even the New York Times the other day ran a long editorial on the elections, sounding the alarm that there is a very clear effort on the part of the administration to either subvert it or effectively refuse to validate it. Those are very real possibilities, and at that point, there's no exit.
That would be such a radical breach with the limited democratic norms in your country and mine. I do see people all the time saying Trump might cancel the elections. He might run for a third time. He might seek to change the law. He might militarize the streets and the polling places using the armed forces or ICE or some other horror that we haven't yet encountered. But Trump is so unpopular right now in the US, it's hard to see that he could get away with that, isn't it?
Well, I think it's precisely because he's so unpopular. And remember, whether the Democrats would actually carry out impeachment proceedings or not is an open question. However, he's terrified of that. And I think that he doesn't really care much about public opinion. He cares about, and it's not just him because he's very limited, but the people around him. This whole Project 2025 group has been very efficient about deconstructing democratic institutions and democratic norms, and they're not going to give up power. And you're right that his unpopularity is staggering. I mean, about 70% disapproval rating or something like that. But I think that provides even more impetus for him to subvert the elections, not less.
Yeah, but the backlash would be, or at least one would hope that the backlash would be so considerable. The level of mutiny in the ranks of the state would be considerable, and presumably the virility of the bench, the judges, the courts would be considerably aroused. Or am I being too optimistic?
Well, first of all, he's been purging the courts of judges, especially on the federal level. And number two, the Department of Justice is just a Trump vengeance machine. It's not going to implement court rulings. We had, I think, 91 court rulings against ICE in Minneapolis. All of them were ignored by the administration. So unfortunately, the judicial system is anemic and weak, and the Department of Justice is now completely captive to Trump partisans. And so the question is enforcement. And he has ICE as his kind of, American version of the brown shirts. And these guys are all recruited from white Aryan groups, the Proud Boys. They have very little military training. They have very little police training. They're just goons and thugs. They're now carrying or wearing gloves that give people electric shocks. They've just been called out for using them on students. So it's very, very ugly here. And if Trump feels threatened, it will get even uglier. And I don't think that there will be any reticence on the part of the administration if it is voted out of power, or if the election results appear to return control of Congress to the Democrats. We saw it on January 6th. They certainly will try. What will the blowback be? That's our last best hope if they do that, and that is, that would require a national strike. It would require people really blocking the streets to shut down the commerce, shut down commerce as well as the machinery of government. That's what would have to happen. There's no question the Trump administration would respond violently to that. So we're potentially facing a very, very ugly scenario, one I hope doesn't come to pass, but one I don't think we can exclude.
It sounds a bit like fascism, Chris. Is that the road we're on?
That's yeah. I mean, fascism is embedded within neoliberalism, as Joseph Stiglitz and a few others have pointed out. It is the opposite of a democratic system is about equality. Neoliberalism is about staggering social inequality, and of course, neoliberalism was embraced by the so-called liberal class, whether it was Tony Blair or whether it was Clinton, or so they are culpable. And there's a lot of legitimate rage, which Trump has tapped into. But, Trump's administration I think it has more billionaires and that's saying a lot given Obama and others, than any other previous administration. It's been just a complete pillage on the part of not just the billionaire class, but the Trump family as well. I think they're estimated to have made so far $1.2 billion in personal profit. Fascism is not the wrong word. And I long have attacked the Christian right as fascist. I wrote a book called American Fascists, the Christian Right and the War in America. And I, as you know, speak as a seminary graduate and, in fact, an ordained Presbyterian minister. So I'm not anti-Christian, but I look at these people as heretics, and they have sacralized the worst elements of American imperialism and white supremacy and capitalism. That is really the core. I mean, that's where J.D. Vance and these kind of figures come out of.
I feel sure that Jesus himself would not recognize these Christians in the American political system. Chris Hedges, journalist, writer, host of the Chris Hedges Report. Many, many thanks for joining us. Now, Chris Hedges should be the Secretary of State. He would be if there was any sanity in the United States. Instead, it's little Marco Rubio, about which more later. Now, YouTube comments are flooding in. Ian McKillop, 1774, says it always boomerangs. We sent drones to Ukraine, and now diesel is set to hit £2 a litre. Christina Hines says the super-rich corporates want land bought up and small family businesses put out of business. The harpsichord of Mozart, 4258, says Trump has gone completely mad. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, has said Trump wants to nuke Iran. Louis Sharp says Iran is one of the most self-sufficient countries in the world. And Bonsai88 says stock up on toilet paper, Yanks. Most of it comes from Canada. And Bottom 80% sends $70 to the show. Thank you very much indeed. Says it's high time that Canada stands up against the US investor class. Let me take a quick break. I should have done so already. It's your calls right up to Gayatri's Roundup. Stay tuned.
What a great show this is! I listened to it, I thought, wow, what a great show. I've called into your show today, George, because I'm a great caller. Probably the greatest caller you've ever had. I really am. The only way your show could be better is if it had more of me, Donald J. Trump, in it. You keep talking about me, George. You do. I've heard it, I have. So many of the American people, the best people, listen to your show. And I've heard them crying about me. I have, and I listen and I go, ooh, America, don't cry. Don't cry. You need to be careful what you say about me, George. You don't want me to put a tariff on your show like I did with China. And then you'll come running for my help, just like little Zelensky. You know, I know you will. I know these things. Make the mother of all talk shows great again. That's why we're here. That's what we're gonna do, George. We're gonna boost your ratings. Donald is gonna boost them bigly. I'm giving your show the Trump bump. You're welcome, George. Thank me. And remember, nobody talks like me. Nobody calls like me. And absolutely nobody ends a phone call like me. I'm hanging up now. Not because I finished, but because I won.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You've got 10 minutes left to vote. Will Trump's D-Day sanctions starve Iran into submission? Not many takers for yes, and so the quantum is important. Let's get to 25,000 votes in the next 10 minutes. Please, you can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and on patreon.com/George Galloway. Alex is in Toronto, on Canada and the USA. Alex, welcome.
Hi, George, multi-time caller, and I had to call this time due to all the problems in Canada. But I wanted to begin with the fact that I'm very happy that you have this fundraiser for Aurobis. To be honest, I was about to send them some money. Instead, I sent you $100 because without your platform, Aurobis wouldn't be in the position that he's in today, where he's actually getting some attention. And I really appreciate that you do things like that.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for that, mate.
Not a problem.
I really appreciate it.
And as for Carney, to be honest, I was a little surprised that he bit back at the Americans, but at the same time, from the beginning, I considered him to be suffering from corporate capture as much as Donald Trump or Biden. After the war was launched against Iran 6 months ago now, Carney immediately said after the bombing of the Monologue school that Iran was a monstrous society and that he gave the United States full support. And then we built, I don't know if you're aware of the famous Gordie Howe Bridge between Detroit and Canada. It's a bridge that Canada paid to the U.S. However, Canada funded the entire bridge, and one of Trump's demands was that we share the revenue 50-50 on the new bridge with the Americans, and Carney caved in. But I think what finally happened was, even though Carney represents Canadian investor interests, the demands by Trump and this completely insane administration, he couldn't even take it anymore and said, look, this is not a zero-sum game. It should be something where we mutually benefit. But I think at some point, Trump will get some of what he's asking for from Canada, and I'm quite frightened. Just a couple of days ago on our national television show, we had CBC that started to talk about funding, foreign funding for the Alberta separation, a referendum. And I was saying, wow, this is wonderful. They're going to finally point out, as Larry Johnson did, about the CIA funding, regime change in Canada. But halfway through it, they said, wow, we believe it's the Russians and the Chinese that are interfering in Alberta's election, which is quite disappointing. But it's
always the Russians and the Chinese. Nothing could, it's as plain as the nose on his face that the US is trying to break Canada up as a prelude to taking it over entirely. Why would China or Russia want to separate Alberta from the rest of Canada? Canada's just made a strategic partnership with China. It's one of the reasons why Trump is hopping mad. The relations, once rock bottom between Canada and China, are now considerably improved. In fact, they've never been better. And cui bono? Who stands to gain from a breakup of Canada, separatism in Canada? It's those in the United States who want to weaken and absorb Canada, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I would have to, I'm just so disappointed that the media constantly supports that small investor class. Because I'll tell you right now, 99% of Americans have no problem with Canada. All right? And Canadians don't have a problem with Americans. They have a problem with the American investor class and the people that represent them in the White House and in the administration. And until people can somehow elect officials like yourself, people that stand up against these private interests, nothing's going to change. As Chris Hedges just said, that we're rigged about these rigged elections. It's a farce. It's a farce because if a Democrat or Republican wins, it was rigged. I'll believe they're not rigged when I see a Democrat or a Republican lose in the election. And I can say the same could be said for the Labour and the Conservative Party in Britain as well.
Absolutely. Brilliant call, Alex. Don't be a stranger. Call regularly. And thanks for that handsome donation, Alex in Toronto. Now, another round of recognition for more of tonight's top Moat supporters. Big thank you to John Jensen, Sheila Sutherland, Kevin Jones, John Dickerson, and Nigel Ellis Brown. Big thanks. Your support for Moats.tv is very much appreciated. It keeps the program going, independent and on air. If you'd like to support us, and I think you should, then go to Moats.tv and press the Donate Now button. Another call from Canada, Joel in Vancouver. He liked my monologue. I'm very glad to hear it, Joel. What did you like in particular?
I like everything about it, George. Just when I think that you can't do anything better, you're upping the bar continually. And I want to send my love and respect to your family and your team, like usual. Thank you so much. Well, I think we're at the inflection point. We're at the inflection point for the empire. China standing up and refusing to abide by admittedly completely ridiculous. The Iran stuff was completely out of control. And I'm getting sick of this regime always using the superlatives. It's so cheesy. Anyways, China denies the greatest sanctions of all time. And at the same moment, Trump is chopping off its integrated industrial base in Canada. Do you know Canada has been sending petroleum products to the United States at less than cost? So we're looking at again, I'll tell you, because previously we've spoken about it, that this is the transnational socioeconomic elite that are running everything. And we see all of this irrationality. I think that's some kind of a combination with how Trump interfaces with the transnational elite. That's why there'll be no change when the Democrats come in. That's why there's no apparent change coming to Canada, the greatest per capita contributor to the war on Russia. I mean, give me a break. Anyways, it looks like that's what I wanted to say. I just wanted to know, Canadians, the 99% in Canada.
I've got a question, Joe. The Conservatives in Canada are kind of in a bind because Carney is clearly, rhetorically at least, standing up for Canada against the bully. It's difficult for them to identify with the bully, so they do a bit of nitpicking here and there about Carney's language. They accused him today of overreacting, for example. But where is the so-called left party, the NDP? Are they making any statements? I never see anything from them. Are they profiting politically in any way from this standoff?
The short answer is no. They've brought in a new leader to supersede Jagmeet Singh, who had the bromance with Justin Trudeau. And just so happened that Justin got all of his policies in place, and we got 5 million people from one particular state of India, which just so happens to be the state that Jagmeet Singh came from. But there's nothing. Avi Lewis is the new leader of the NDP, and I'll just predict for you that that's not going to go anywhere. At the same time, P.D. Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, he's completely lost all of his credibility, and there's infighting in that party. Carney, while he is a competent administrator, and anybody would look good after Justin. But Carney, we can't forget, is the poster child for the World Economic Forum. So we're in a bit of a pickle here. What do you think about that answer?
Well, he did say the quiet part out loud the last time he went to Davos, and nothing of any note usually ever gets said there. But when he pointed out that the rules-based international order was not just a hoax, but we all knew it was a hoax. Well, thanks very much. Those of us who were saying it was a hoax were traduced as agents of Putin, of China, of revolution. And then up comes the poster boy himself and gives the game away. That was quite useful, I thought.
Well, yeah, but ultimately I have to think, who is it useful for? Again, he is the world economic, socio-economic elite poster child. I'm not saying he's not a competent administrator. Clearly he knows what he's doing. But at the end of the day, where are we going? Association with the UK? With the king as the head of our state? It's just farcical.
Indeed farcical. The king being the head of our state is farcical. It's even more farcical when he's the head of a state in North America. Mind you, Trump seems to quite fancy the idea of being the king of all of the North and South of America. Joel in Vancouver, thank you very much indeed. Now you can download the podcast by scanning the QR code on the screen now, and you can listen to the podcast at moats.tv. Once you've listened, please rate it. It helps us a lot. Now, my favourite bit of the show every week is to tell you that this week the podcast is in the top 10 for politics in Kuwait, Zimbabwe, and the United Arab Emirates, and in the top 30 for politics in Chile, Senegal, Egypt, and Malta. A very eclectic group of countries there indeed. Big thanks to everyone who watches, listens, subscribes, and shares the mother of all talk shows. The Prince is in Texas on Gaza and Ukraine. Not Prince William, he's left, he's come back to England. Oh, Harry, I meant. I got them confused. Prince, you're most welcome. Go ahead. Are you there, Prince?
Hey, John, can you hear me?
I think he is. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying I'm probably more sophisticated than him, but how you doing?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thank you very much. What do you want to say, Prince?
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the questions. I think we talk about all of these things we talk about, but I think the biggest thing about the whole Western policies is racism. That's what it boils down to. Because, you see, Trump is talking about tariffs on Iran, and, you know, if that continues and millions of people die in Iran like they died in Iraq in the 90s, you know, nobody bats an eye. It's just a bunch of brown people dying, just like the people who are dying and suffering and dying needlessly in Cuba. There's nobody on the so-called left, you know, the people, the resistance liberals, the ones who told us that, you know, we are all, you know, equality and we're all in this together. Those ones who wore a mask and drove in a car by themselves. You know, the point is there's a callousness or a carelessness towards human life, which these demons, is among these demons, which is like
and of course, complete double standard. The children, women, men, young and old, slaughtered indiscriminately in Gaza are almost worthless so far as the prevailing orthodoxy is concerned. I know that because they mean a very great deal to me, and whenever I draw attention to them, post their pictures that one would have thought would arouse sympathy, empathy, regret, guilt, amongst the vast majority of humanity, in fact, draw enmity of a quite staggering amount. Of course, there are tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, thanks to social media, who are now mobilized, conscientized on the situation in Gaza, but there are still far more who don't give a toss. Some actively support the genocide in Gaza, but most don't give it a moment's thought, because a dead Palestinian child, to them, is scarcely a child at all. And so, you know that great experiment in the 60s, I think, the Milgram experiment, when it was established beyond any doubt that you can get people, humans, to literally think they are torturing people by electric shocks, and they'll do it because somebody in a white coat with a clipboard in a lab told them to do it. Somebody in authority told them to do it. And we are now, I'm reading a wonderful book at the moment by a good friend of mine from Beijing, Ryan Perkins. I'm going to have him on the show quite soon, as soon as we can arrange it. But he develops the thesis that COVID was characterized by many things, but one of the things was the single point of truth. So the prevailing orthodoxy on COVID, where the whole country was encouraged, even forced, coerced, to listen to that single point of truth and to accept a conventional wisdom which has turned out to be very unwise indeed, of very dubious legality, dubious wisdom, dubious usefulness, but we were all kind of dragooned into following the demands of that single point of truth. But Ryan makes the point, how completely and totally in one wheel of an action, COVID was dropped and Ukraine became the new COVID. It was Ukraine's avatar that you had to post. It was Ukraine that you had to be socially active for. It was Ukraine that became the single point of truth, the conventional wisdom, and the actual facts didn't matter at all. And black became white, war became peace, truth became lies. Everything was turned on its head. Truth was turned on its head. It started with COVID, it became Ukraine, and it's taken a long time and millions of deaths to begin even to change the paradigm on Ukraine in public opinion. I could show you my scars to prove it. And even that we have changed public relations, public opinion, we haven't changed the governments. You can have a government with 13% approval rate, as Britain had and Germany has, but they're still able to get their war policy through and implemented by the collaboration of the so-called oppositions, the so-called parliaments, and of course the so-called media. Big thanks. I'm closing the poll, and 98%, 94%, 96%, 95%, and 98% of you think that Trump's D-Day sanctions will not starve Iran into submission. A very considerable vote of confidence in the people of Iran. Some comments. Coffee23 says the West Bank yesterday, the settlers stole a Palestinian donkey and tortured it to death, and on camera for anyone that's prepared to watch it. Stop and Listen sends $5 to the Moats audience. Please do not forget Gaza is still undergoing a genocide. Do not lose track. The price of our freedom is called Palestine. And Chuckna Smith 319 says perhaps we should ban Israelis from entering your country unless they prove they are not terrorist war criminals. And Michael Olabisi Rahim says both Jeffries and Schumer are the two arrowheads of AIPAC in the Democratic Party. Paul Metz Cohen says, I sent a donation to Moats, but it didn't show up. It went through, however. Paul, please let us know the details of that so that we can check that out. Angel is in Nashville on the US and Iran. Angel, welcome.
Thank you, George. I'm not surprised at all about the poll numbers because Iran has a sanction-proof economy, produces and manufactures 92% of its own food, and then they share direct land border with 7 countries, and then they have maritime borders with another 6. They have a 10,000-kilometer rail to China, to Xi'an, and then they're in the process of building that Rasht-Astara railway to Russia. It's just 162 kilometers. So, and besides just the economics of it, Iran's people are also sanction-proof, and these are people who they're on the right side of history, and that counts for a lot. That adds a whole lot of morale. It's not like these starving sailors on the USS Lincoln with every day more and more diminishing morale. And I wanted to draw attention to something that I heard from a reliable source, that they're actually planning to dock the Lincoln before it arrives in the U.S., somewhere for it to be cleaned and painted, which, just shows how our administration is all about, it's what we would call in Trinidad a poppy show. It's like a horse and pony show. Everything is for show, and they don't really care about these sailors no more than they care about our homeless veterans on the street that I see every day, where, in Nashville, 1/3 of our homeless are veterans. And I see them disabled with wheelchairs on the side of the road every day holding up cardboard signs. So these sailors are dispensable to them. This is not I agree with Chris Hedges, this is not a Christian country. This is a country that worships capitalism and austerity politics. And, the irony of us going around the world and kidnapping Maduro and breaching Article 2 of the UN Charter is that we're losing our autonomy here. We're losing our free speech. In the last, couple of years, starting with Biden, I saw us lose our First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 15th Amendment, 14th Amendment rights. We're losing our constitutional rights on the whims and fancies of this illegitimate imperialist, construct, which is, in my opinion, a Western military installation masquerading as a country. And I'll take your thoughts on my comments. Thank you so much for the opportunity, George.
Well, we've had many good calls tonight, but that was the best one, Angel. I really couldn't better how you put all that. I agree with every single word, syllable that you said, and said so powerfully and so beautifully. So I'll leave it at that and hope the vast majority of our audience take on board exactly what you've had to say. Top call of the evening, in my view. Now, a Robos called in earlier, and we've tried to call him back, but so far, no luck. But just a reminder how you can help our Moats legend in New York. Search for Erobos, E-R-O-B-O-S, on the GoFundMe website and give what you can to help him. We're on 3,300 £132 now. That's up another 100 in the last 20 minutes. So we're almost at the target. Please make sure that we get to our target this evening. Last call before Gayatri is Big Tomato, or we say tomato, but let's not call the whole thing off. Big tomato, depending on your point of view. Who wants to talk about third-party candidates? Go ahead, sir. What do you want to say?
Thank you, George. Thank you for taking my call. And I had a question prepared, but I want to preface it by saying, my goodness, I have to gather my thoughts because that last call was truly spectacular. I agree with you. Holy, what an incredibly cogent and well thought out call. My goodness. So she's still listening.
Someone called Angel. She was a perfect
exactly.
angel.
Well, let's find her a podium. My question for you, George, it harkens back to a call from a couple of weeks ago. If you won't mind my asking, I remember that the name was Layla because you put it to the tune of the Clapton song. And she called to ask about, or to make the point that a candidate, a hypothetical candidate like Tucker Carlson, who may superficially or may in reality offer a path to a better world for so many people, as you aptly put it, certainly on the topic of the affair in Palestine, in occupied Palestine. But she questioned potentially, what shortcomings come from a candidate like that who maybe has a track record that's, in the view of some people, unsavory. She mentioned a candidate whose name I know, but I would certainly agree with you, Butch, where in candidates of that sort are kind of more, for armchair coffee shop conversations, and one would not want to lose track of the bigger question of, again, the fate of, for example, Palestine. But the question, I guess, that I have for you, George, is where one draws the line when thinking about third-party candidates. I've voted for basically the unconventional third-party candidate for 30 years in the United States, and many close to me would say I'm wasting my vote, and maybe statistically they're right that I'm wasting my vote. But I voted for candidates who, while they may have no serious chance of winning, I would presume, and forgive me for this presumption, that maybe they'd be who you would vote for if you were in the United States. And I recognize that that's not a that's not a ticket that's likely to cash. So I was wondering if you could maybe break down for listeners, myself most of all, where you draw the line and maybe what the importance is of third-party candidate voting, especially if it's as a matter of fact.
It's another great call and a great question. I don't need to look in the crystal ball. I can read you from the book. I haven't supported a mainstream presidential candidate since Jack Kennedy, and I was only 9 years old when he died. I have always supported the third-party candidate. Even as a very young teenager, I supported Jill Stein. Last time I supported her first time in 2016. She's a personal friend of mine. I even supported Ross Perot, right-wing populist though he was, because I couldn't support either of the mainstream, so-called mainstream candidates. So I don't support either the Democrats or the Republicans. I always support a third-party candidate. So now we're down to what are the criterion? Well, of course they're different in every election, but my criterion right now is to stop World War III. Not for me, I'm ready to die, believe me. Some days I lose the will to live. But for my children and your children and the children of the world, I have 6 children and 5 grandchildren and many more grandchildren to come, I'm sure. So I have some skin in this for future generations of my own blood and of your blood. So if, as I do, I believe that the literal continued existence of humanity is at stake, well, that puts me in quite a tolerant mood for finding the candidate who can win, which is my second criterion. Butch Ware was mentioned in the now famous, infamous call, contretemps, between me and the caller. I'm sure he's, my light has just gone out. I hope you can still see me. But whether you can see me, I hope you can still hear me. I'm sure that Butch Ware is an outstanding fellow. If he was Jill Stein's running mate, then he must be a person of value. But there is nobody watching this who believes that Butch Ware can win the presidency of the United States, can defeat Kamala Harris or Big Tooth in California, Gavin Newsom. There is nobody watching this who thinks that Butch Ware can defeat J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. I think we've got to be honest about that. Can Tucker Carlson defeat them? The answer to that has to be yes. From name recognition to ability to fundraising capacity, he clearly could, not necessarily will, but clearly could defeat the Democrats and or the Republicans in a presidential election. So what are Tucker Carlson's pluses and minuses? Some want to concentrate on his minuses, which are perceived to be, though I haven't had the chance to talk to him about this yet, but I hope to have him on the show soon. Weakness on race. That's really the only thing I've heard prayed in aid against my thesis so far, and it's an important matter. And I want to hear what he's got to say on it. But his pluses are that he's Israel's enemy number one. Fact, not opinion. Israel's enemy number one. He is Ukraine's enemy number one. He is the enemy of every supporter of the Iran war. Fact, not opinion. So if a guy opposes the war on Iran, supports Palestine, opposes Israel, demands an end to the Ukraine war, well, it's kind of a no-brainer if that guy has a chance to win. Call me old-fashioned. But as a triptych, Iran, Palestine, and the Ukraine war, with the ability to actually win and be in the White House, well, to me, I'm sorry, but it's no contest. So you ask where I draw the line, there's where I've drawn the line. Thank you for the opportunity to draw it. I can't let you back in because now, here's the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So following the last month's World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization launched in Shanghai, which introduced the Kimi K3.0, beating overnight any American AI developments and platforms, and last week's World Humanoid Robot Games in Beijing, dazzling all attendees and all viewers witnessing Chinese robots beating Usain Bolt's 100 meters world record, the United States is currently preparing a bill to force the Dutch government to ban a Dutch company from selling chip-making machines to China. So the company concerned is called ASML, and it's basically the only company in the world that makes the lithography machine, which is very, very crucial to produce the very complex semiconductor microchips. Now, the bill is called the Match Act, and it's currently before the US Congress, and it aims to force American allies to adopt their export policy for sensitive technology. So it's basically an extension of Pax Silica, which the US launched last year, which is a coalition to secure the semiconductor supply chain. So with this Match Act, the US thinks that it can hereby restrict China's access to advanced chips and also curb their development in the military. Can you imagine that they think they can curb the development of Chinese military? So if the bill passes, the Dutch company would not be able to sell machines or maintain machines already sold to China. And if they do not comply, then the US will impose sanctions.
It's just unbelievable. First of all this talk of chips has got me hungry. And it's almost breakfast time here in China. But secondly, I mean, how can the United States forbid a foreign state from selling its own products to China? Well, the answer is only if you let them.
Yeah.
Only if you agree that Donald Trump is your daddy can you possibly tolerate such a thing. Yet they all do. They all think America is their daddy, even though America's the worst imaginable daddy.
Indeed, and this is of course not the first time the Dutch has been under pressure, and last year in September 2025 they did succumb to it, where they seized control of the Nexperia company, where they just expelled the Chinese CEO and inserted their own director.
Property rights and all that.
Yeah, well,
capitalism.
Yeah.
The sacred right of private property. Hey, we'll take that. We'll kick out the CEO, the actual CEO of the actual owners of the company, and we'll put in, I don't know, somebody called Van Dyke.
Exactly. Well, they learned the lesson the hard way, because China countermeasured and banned the export of these Nexperia products, causing a big disruption in the supply chains for the automobile. So who knows what's going to happen now? I mean, the likelihood of the Netherlands winning the lobby over the US lawmakers is very slim. So well, how do you call it? This very merry-go-round just continues, doesn't it?
How extraordinary.
Extraordinary. Now, I just want to close with South Africa, because that's where we will be very soon. And I would like to remind our audience in South Africa, surrounding countries, that we will be going to Pretoria, Wits University at it, Polokwane, Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. And the programs, you can read them all on the website. I will provide you this. It's gallowayridley.za. And in particular, you can WhatsApp the following number, which is +2772 588 1231. And you'll get all the information for
That's how you
venues.
get tickets.
Yes, the tickets. And this is, of course, all a fundraising tour for Palestine. So it's very important that our friends and audience in South Africa do come.
Amandla! Away to. We'll be in South Africa soon. Hope to see you. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it for you. Big thanks to all our friends in China who help make these broadcasts possible. And a big thanks to you, the audience. God willing, we'll be back on Wednesday with the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.